Maybe it's the sleep deprivation slowly strangling your brain cells, but something that happens as a parent is on occasion you begin to actually enjoy the shows that your kids watch. Like your kid, you ever done this? Your kid will leave the room and you keep watching the show like, look, I gotta find out where these clues are leading, Blue. I had one of those moments. I put on a show with Shaun the Sheep for Mitchell. And I was paying attention to this one episode. The sheep, they go and they find this magic lamp. They rub it and a genie pops out and gives the sheep wishes. And they line up. And the thing is, though, the sheep, they go to the genie, can wish for anything. And they're like, I just want a pizza. And he gives them the pizza, and the next sheep goes up, well, man, that looks really, I want one of those. And just like sheep after sheep is doing that. And the one sheep's like trying to get the others, like, guys, you gotta think bigger than this. And the sheep like, all right, well, ask for bigger pizzas. And that's kind of the point of the episode. But that sense of the world is yours, and really, I just want extra meat deep dish. Today marks a bit of a shift in the focus on the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus moves on from his examination of the law and its intent and our inability to meet it. And here he begins to talk about the rewards that we choose. And so often we choose the smaller rewards in life. If you got your Bible apps or your Bibles, you can open to Matthew chapter 6 and read along. Jesus says, beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them, for then you will have no reward from your Father who is in heaven. Thus, when you give to the needy, sound no trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may be praised by others. Truly, I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. So the opening verse there, again, this introduces a shift. For the next 3 weeks, we'll look at 3 different areas that he addresses under this general topic. He says, beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them, for then you will have no reward from your Father who is in heaven. Now, the people that Jesus is talking to in his audience, they lived in an honor-based culture, which meant that one of the biggest priorities for them was maintaining their social standing, the respect that other people held for you and for your family. Now, this, and its most basic element, is not a bad desire. Everybody cares to some degree what other people think about them. Even people who tell, well, I don't care what other people think about me. I'm like, well, you're wearing deodorant right now. So, I mean, that's at least a small step in that direction. But the problem was that they had turned their spirituality into a performance in some really important ways. And so Jesus covers these 3 areas of public religious life that they had, in their giving, in their praying, and in their fasting. So he says, beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them. The truth is, guys, we're all posing a lot. The difference is, those of you in the older generations, you were put on public display and on marked times. For instance, when you got up on Sunday morning to go to church, you remember your parents dressing you in the most uncomfortable clothes that you had, because you were going to church to see and be seen by people. You were being on display in the church. Or when you went to somebody else's house for dinner, I still remember the feeling of my parents pinching the scruff of my neck and giving me that special parent talk, you better not embarrass us. Because you were going on display. It was to be seen. If you want to understand the pressures of social media on the younger generations, just take that feeling being pinched by the scruff of the neck and apply it to all day, all the time. Because that's what social media has done, is it's put people who are involved in it, all of a sudden it's not just, oh, on Sunday I'm going to be on display. My entire life is now in some degree of performance. Anytime my kid, does something cute, his parents will whip out their phones. I go to the park, I whip out my phone. I do anything, any major life event, any job promotion, everything is supposed to be cataloged and put before the public eye. For younger kids, there's even another layer to this. Because they'll like post these stories, they're called, on Snapchat and Instagram. And then they'll do like mundane things. They'll shoot a video of them doing that. And then other people will watch them. And then they'll go back and watch who watched them. Because it'll tell them exactly who it is that watched their stories. And they'll keep like mental tabs of who is watching me. And then they'll watch other kids as they watch them watching them. We're posing. Let me tell you, we would be fools to think that this doesn't affect the way that we interact with God. Proverbs chapter 27, verse 21 says this: "The crucible is for silver, and the furnace is for gold, and a man is tested by his praise." So you want to find out how pure silver is? You melt it down, you test it in a crucible or a furnace. And it says, praise that you get from other people will test you. Man, I remember preaching my first sermon. And I got done, and afterwards the people in the church were so, oh, that was so great. Clearly anointed and all that stuff. Part of it might have been that I was so nervous that I wrapped the thing up in 5 minutes. And people were like, oh man, if we could do that every Sunday, yeah, you keep at it. But I got my first taste of what it was like to be praised by people like that. And let me tell you, praise from other people can be so addicting. Because I realized from that moment that I would make a choice in my ministry. It would be so easy for me to go through the rest of my life as a pastor judging my effectiveness based on the response of other people. How many people pat you on the back after it's a good sermon? How many people show up on a Sunday morning when it rains? How much do people give? How many people watched my video last week? And the problem is, once you begin to go down that road, it's never enough. I mean, look at people who are like internet famous, right? They're not ever satisfied. I've got like 7 million followers. You know what? I want 7 million and one. For some of you, though, the crucible that tests you is not the praise from other people, but their potential criticism of you. In your mind's eye, you don't have cheering crowds shouting your name. You've got your critics who might say something about you if you do this or if you don't do that. And that becomes the driving factor in your life. You make decisions. What could so-and-so think of me if I do this or if I don't do that? I've been very conscious of this as we raise our kids up as pastors' kids in the church. Because I understand, even though everybody's like super laid back and all your kids are just kids, there is a different standard that people apply to your kids as pastors' kids. And I never, ever want to find myself telling my kids, what will people think? Right? Because what that does is it turns their motivation to be outward looking, to take their cues for righteousness from what other people think of them. Because when you do this, Jesus says, you will have no reward from your Father who is in heaven. This is a repeated thing, this idea of rewards, and you choose who gives you those rewards. The truth is, there will be famous workers for God who enter heaven only to discover that they had chosen through their attitude of their heart to already have gotten their rewards in this life. So we've got to choose. Then Jesus goes into verse 2 here. Thus, when you give to the needy, sound no trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may be praised by others. Truly I say to you, they have received their reward. So he says, when you give to the needy. Now, some people at this point might say, oh, well, I've already solved that problem. I don't give at all. That's not a temptation for me. Giving for their eyes, just don't give. He says, when you give. It is a part of the Christian life. You should be giving in proportion to your income. And then the church should be using some of that money to help those who are in need around them. This goes all the way back to the book of Deuteronomy. The laws of Moses. For there will never cease to be poor in the land. Therefore I command you, you shall open wide your hand to your brother, and to the needy, and to the poor in your land. This was baked into the covenant with Israel, this special concern for the least of these in their society. And then in the early church, even as they struggled over, okay, what do we do with the Old Testament? We're not under those laws. As Paul went, he writes about in the book of Galatians, and he talked to the apostles in Jerusalem. They agreed not to burden the Gentiles with the law of Moses, but they said this: only they asked us to remember the poor, the very thing I was eager to do. So this is not an optional thing. If you consider yourself a follower of Jesus and it's not reflected in the use of the money that God has entrusted to you, something is wrong. But again, Jesus is not preaching a sermon on giving here. He's not encouraging them to give because they're already giving. He's talking to these Jews who looked at themselves as righteous because they were giving. He points back to an issue of the heart. The New Testament, by the way, focuses way more on why we give than how much. Just giving isn't enough. Jesus tells the parable of the Pharisee and the tax collector. The Pharisee looks at the tax collector and says, God, I thank you that I'm not like him. I tithe 1/10 of all I get. He had taken a good thing and used it as a way to view himself as inherently better than other people. Jesus says, don't blow a trumpet in the streets. There's some debate over what this means. The general sense, though, is giving money in some way that had an eye on other people and their recognition of you, to be seen by them. Now, we see this in other areas of our culture. You go to any nonprofit organization or building, you'll see one of these. Right? You know what this is? It's a donor plaque. We love that, don't we? Because if you give money, you expect, well, my name will get on a wall, or it'll get on a plaque, or if you give a lot of money, they'll put your name on a building. They'll put a statue of you up there. Right? Because they understand that's what motivates people. Who wouldn't want something named after them? I've heard of churches doing this. This kind of thing. There was one church, they would call people up during offering time, right? And they'd say, all of you are going to give $20 left to come forward now and give your offering. And then they have a $50 or less level, and my $100 givers, where are my $100 givers? Come on up. And can you imagine? I think it'd be effective in some way, yeah, because again, people want to be seen and respected by them. I don't know if they have ushers checking how much they're actually putting in. But what motivation are you encouraging by doing that? To be seen by other people. Now, that's not most of the time, though. A lot of times what we do is a lot more subtle. There's this thing called the missionary selfie, which is where affluent white Americans go to impoverished countries, apparently mainly to take pictures with poor ethnic kids to have on their profile to look like a good person. Every mission trip I've been on, they specifically tell people, look, you were not here just for a vacation and take some pictures with people. Other times, people give and then carry with that an expectation of a measure of power and influence over what goes on in the church. In fact, I can tell you the only times I've really had people tell me some sense of what they give is tagged on, because I give, I want you to do this. People actually do that. But here's what Jesus says: but when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. Earlier this year, we had to cancel church one time because it was snowing out or something, ice on the roads. And I was in here, I forget if it was that afternoon or the next day, and I was doing some stuff here at the church, and somebody pulled in and opened the door and kind of looked startled to see me there, because what they were doing was sneaking in to give their time. They're yeah, we just canceled church, but I wanted to make sure that I got in and gave it. And they looked surprised to see oh man, I've been caught now. And some people actually get upset if they get caught giving, because they take this like super literally, like if anybody ever knows what I give, then like God won't reward me. Understand, Jesus here is talking about the intent of your heart, right? So if you give, not that they do this, but if you give, like the usher goes to the bag, like piece of the check or whatever, like that's not going to mess up what God will give to you on the last day. God knows your heart. On a practical level, we should aim, though, as much as possible to make our giving something that is only between us and God. And that's the reason nearly every church is like this. The pastor is totally separated from the individual finances of people in the church. I have no idea how much you guys give. When they're doing offering, I'm like playing music or something. I don't know who gives and how much, and it just prevents any partiality or favoritism to develop based on the money that people give. But it's not, though, just, okay, you need to avoid the bad motives. Jesus here says you should have a different motive. It's not just avoiding the bad, it's replacing it with something that is proper to motivate us. He says, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. Sarah puts a great deal of time and effort into recognizing the kids' church volunteers who do stuff here at the church. And so one of the ways that we did this a little while ago, we gave out these bags of popcorn with a Redbox rental code on it to give you a free movie. And she said, all right, Aaron, you got one job. Go there and hand these out. And you can tell as I'm holding one of these, I missed somebody. I think they weren't here that Sunday. And then like the next Sunday, I forgot about it. And then Finn happened. And so my brain is shot. And I have no idea, honestly, who was supposed to get this.
Miss Kathy.
Was it you, Miss Kathy?
No, Miss Kathy Bowers. I hadn't gotten it lately.
Okay.
I've got sleep deprivation. I remember.
Yeah, sleep. She remembers. See, that's why she does this stuff. I'm terrible at it, but. Well, you just messed up the next point. I was going to say, well, somebody we don't know who was mistakenly left out of our recognition. You ever feel like that? You do the same amount of work as everybody else, maybe even more, and nobody sees what you do. Nobody goes up to you and pats you on the back. In fact, I tell people the first ministry I ever had in the church, my first toe dipping in the water of service was I ran the projector. And there was in the back in a loft. And it was a perfect preparation for the rest of the ministry. Because nobody ever goes up to the dude clicking the slides and says, hey man, you were awesome at that today, unless they're Eric. And he's like behind the back. Because he's got the click. I was just back there. Nobody ever saw me. The only time you got recognized clicking the slides is when you messed up and everybody did that. And it was just a great preparation for ministry because you're going to be in that position at some point in your life. You're going to do something for somebody and nobody's going to know. And sometimes, if we're honest, it upsets us. Nobody sees what I've done, but let me tell you, your Father who sees in secret will not forget. God sees. He knows when you've given in faith, not knowing how your budget's going to turn out this month. God knows when you got that extra money and gave extra from it. God knows when you've blessed somebody specifically, individually, when they really needed it. God knows when you paid that bill for somebody who is struggling. God sees all of that. And He promises a reward. And I'll just tell you, it's better than popcorn in a movie. I mean, really, Sarah had wanted to give everybody a Disney vacation. I'm like, no, Sarah. Our budget can't afford that. But imagine if you got to choose, right? Would you like a thing of popcorn or a Disney vacation? And that's the two ways that we recognize our volunteers. I mean, some of y'all won't even eat the popcorn. You're on like one of those special diets or whatever. But God says you get to choose who pays you back. You can either work for the recognition of other people, which let me tell you is fleeting and unsatisfying, and the same people that praise you one week will talk about you behind your back the next week. Or you can work for God who sees you in secret and says, I will repay you. Now, I'm not saying that the other people who actually got these when they're supposed to have somehow given up part of their eternal reward. But I want to encourage you today that nothing that we do in this life in service to God is ever wasted. That on the last day, every bit of it will be called up. I don't know if they're going to have like some kind of plaque in heaven, right? Maybe they're going to give out, I always like to think of it this way, achievement badges, like those of you who play video games, like achievement unlocked, you washed the dishes in the church 100 times. And other people have like a 500-time badge, right? Like, special badge, like you stayed after to help clean up, or you wiped runny noses. None of it's wasted. So the next, like I said, few weeks, I just want you guys to be thinking about where your reward is. To let that encourage you. Let's pray. God, I thank you for that promise. Even when we feel left out and ignored, like nobody sees us or hears us, or even if we feel like all our efforts are wasted because we don't see the fruit, and sometimes that fruit is so long and growing. God, when we give and it's painful, you see us. And you have promised your reward that nothing else in this earth can compare to. So I pray that as we do your work, that you would give us the right heart, that we wouldn't be posing in front of other people, but working for an audience of one. In Jesus' name.